Trusted Americans, salary-based mortgage consultants want to help you. Consultants is that word?
Consultants.
Consultants. They want to help you get into a better interest rate and lower your monthly payments today. So go to trustedamerican.com and see how much money Trusted American Mortgage can save you.
Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
What is up? This is Off Field. I'm Liv Moods. He's also Liv Moods. Just kidding. BK, Brandon Krisztal, Nate Jackson, former NFL star,
Superstar, actually.
Superstar, and critically acclaimed New York Times bestselling author.
Got that right, man.
Are you automatically critically acclaimed by being a bestselling author? I think
that's not true, because you can be was 50 Shades of Grey critically acclaimed?
No, but it was clearly
best-selling, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
not, the best books, critically acclaimed books, aren't always the ones that sell a lot. And I'll let you in on a little secret with the way they do the New York Times bestseller list. All you got to do is land on it for a week and you're part of it. And I became part of it when they dropped the price of the ebook. Now, these people still had to buy it.
Yeah.
But it was a promotional thing. They dropped the price of the ebook and it went on the list for a couple of weeks. And by way of that, I'm a critically acclaimed.
It's never going to change. It's some things will always be true. Thinking ahead about the combine real quick. Sam Hartman last year was the fastest quarterback at the combine.
Because he's the only one?
He's the only one.
Well, I wasn't the only one who wrote a book.
No,
but I was the only former football player who wrote a book about the experience. Like, there are not a lot of ex-athletes who actually write a book about the experience. There's a lot of them who do it through a ghostwriter.
Of course.
But to actually sit down and do the work, not a lot do it. So by virtue of being one of the only ones, here we are.
I think I know the answer to this, and we're going to get in. We got plenty of Broncos talk. But did you read Ball 4 by Jim Bouton, which was kind of the gold standard in athlete first-person accounts?
I flipped through it. Definitely was, part of the conversation when my book was coming out, because most of the books that you get are the John Elway story, the Tom Brady story, the Peyton Manning story. I wasn't telling that story. I was telling a much more common story, but a story that folks hadn't heard much, and the Ball 4 was similar to it, kind of the everyman's journey, trying to stay on the team, the reality of getting cut, of getting injured, of a relatively short career arc was the story I wanted to tell, because that was the more common one. 90% of the guys in the NFL, actually more like 99, will never have the longevity of a Peyton Manning, a Tom Brady. It's a 2.8 year average, Brandon.
It's gone down.
In the NFL.
It's
gone down. So that was the story I wanted to tell, and I guess that's why it's a bestseller.
I guess so. I think the one other thing too about books, people may not realize this, and looking at, like, say, our friend Mike Singer, who's written that Joker book, and it's, I think, doing well. But the money basically comes up front, unless you're writing Harry Potter stories, you're J.K. Rowling, or you wrote the 50 Shades of Grey or the whatever, something that's a series. One-off books, even if they're bestsellers, even if Oprah talked about it, even if they're on the New York Times or Amazon bestseller list, you're not necessarily buying a brand new mansion because of your book. It's, you get good money up front and maybe a little bit here and there as it comes out in paperback or the ebook gets a spike, right? Is that how it goes?
Yeah, same with an album if you're a musician, you know what I mean? Like, they don't know it's going to do well. So they'll give you an advance. You sign a contract. For me, it was decent money, but I got it up front. Well, I got a third of it up front, a third of it when the manuscript is delivered, and then a third of it when the book is released. So it was kind of split up in 3 payments. And then when they collect all their money, when they make their money back, that's when you start to make royalties. And most books never reach that. You got to sell, close to 100,000 books to get to the royalties. So I've written two book. I've written 2 books. I've written 2 books. One of them has earned out its advance, and now I get royalties on Slow Getting Up. The other one, Fantasy Man, nobody fucking read it. I'm talking about nobody.
I have it on my bookshelf at home. It's, if you ever see me from my home studio, it is the Beastie Boys one. For some reason is the most prominent, just because of how I said them.
Yeah,
your book is
Fantasy Man.
Fantasy Man is if it's a wider shot, you can definitely see it.
I was so excited about that book because I thought it had a ton of potential. I was following the 2015 season through the eyes of a fantasy football league, playing with my buddies who didn't know anything about, or who didn't play football. I was the one who actually did, and I was getting boat raced, and I wasn't very. But I was also like deciding to play with my head or my heart, the guys I like versus the guys who were producing. But I have this trope in the book where I was the fantasy owner. And when I would cut a guy off my fantasy team, I would call him into my office. I'd sit him down in front of me, and I'd explain to him why it was happening. And then I would press a button under my desk. A trap door would open. He'd fall down, and the dogs would eat him. And Peyton Manning was on my team that year. He didn't have a statistically good year, but he was leading his team, and he led his team to the Super Bowl. So I was grappling as the owner all year with cutting Peyton.
Did you pick up Brock Osweiler? Because that would have made a fun.
No, I forgot. I think I had like Jay Cutler.
Well, yeah, you're gonna pick up someone that's gonna be.
I was filling the team with guys I knew to to create the narrative. But at the end of the book, I do cut Peyton, and I bring him into my office, and like as I start to explain why, he cuts me off, and he gives me a speech as what I think Peyton would say in that situation, and then I hit the button, and he falls down to the dogs, and the dogs that usually eat the guy. They're licking him.
That's a nice ending. I remember when you were writing it, because we're talking about going to the Super Bowl next week and all the details around that.
Yeah.
And I remember at Super Bowl 50, which was when you were writing it, how excited you were.
Yeah.
And you're still excited about it. It
was a fun project.
You poured a lot into it.
I did.
And I think it was a good idea. You're also running into a time where people don't read as much.
And what I didn't know, Brandon, at the time was that nobody gives a crap about your fantasy football league. And I wrote a whole book about it.
Yeah.
And it took me writing a book about it to realize it. But there were some spots in the book that I think were good, that had different narrative lines other than the fantasy. But, a former player living life after dealing with the realities of injuries and addiction and things like that, and purpose, and seeing the sport through a different lens now that I'm not playing it anymore, but now I'm playing this fantasy game, and I'm commoditizing these individuals that I used to be one of. And I used to hate the commoditizing world outside of the NFL. I used to scoff at the media. I was not friends with the media. I used to hate the way that players were commercialized and commoditized and booed and dehumanized. And here I am now doing the same freaking thing. And so it's a weird dichotomy, and I wanted to bring it to life, but no one read the book.
No, but at least I own it. I bought it, and I own it.
And I thank you for that.
I make a point of always buying my friends' books, because I get books sent to me over the years. Certainly when you work in radio and TV, they'll just send you a book because they want you to have the author on. But I make a point when my friends write books to try to buy them, because I'm like, at least let me support their effort.
You don't go as far as to read it, but at least
it depends on the book. There's certainly a handful that I've read. I just don't read as much as I used to.
Nobody does, man. It's crazy. These things really get in the way.
Can I ask
of the reading?
This is a point of contention, and the good thing about my wife never watching hardly anything I do, certainly this show, because she's working an important job and has stuff going on and doesn't care. But she's come around. But in a world of audio books,
it's not called reading it if you're listening to it.
How do you, because in conversation you say, oh, I read, like, you've got audio versions of your books. If I listen to them, I would say, hey, I read your book. I say, hey, I listened to your book on or whatever. Your book was great. I listened
you
to
can say your book was great. But you didn't read it.
Yeah, to tell people I'm reading like 4 books at once. It's like, are you? You got 1 book by your nightstand.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're reading 4, but we need to delineate for everybody out there, not just my wife. Like I said, she's come around. You're listening to those books.
Yeah.
You have made your way through those books. You can get creative with the semantics. Just don't tell people you're reading. Right. All right. Speaking of reading,
real quick, shout out to Liv. She said, "Miss you guys."
Oh, hey Liv, I hope you're feeling better.
Oh,
she is not.
Yeah, she's a little under the weather.
She's not feeling super great, and we get that.
So get
this time of year,
get your liquids, get your hydration, rest.
Big week next week, Super Bowl week.
Yeah,
and that's what we wanted to kind of start with. You and I have never played in a Super Bowl. I obviously haven't played in the NFL yet. You played for almost a decade, by my math. Never made it to a Super Bowl. You're close.
Yeah.
You certainly know people who have, and have talked to plenty of Super Bowl champs, plenty here in town, obviously. What do you think the week is like? Because so much, and we saw with the Broncos, they went into that first playoff game. It's about trying to keep things normal. Yeah. There's nothing normal about the Super Bowl, but one of the things, and the NFL does sometimes stumble into stuff, because we had the stretch where they didn't have 2 weeks between for a couple of years.
Yeah.
The 2 weeks between for the team and to get the best possible game, one, it allows banged up players to heal a little.
Yeah.
But it allows teams to stay home and get through the madness of the organizational part. And both these teams have been there a bunch, and obviously the Chiefs have even more, but 2 years ago with Philly, and then they won 7 years ago, I think today. What do you think it's like for the players And how beneficial is it that they're able to stay in Philly, stay in KC, and get on a plane Sunday, and then you have the kind of the walkthrough week?
Yeah, I think it's unusual because typically it's kind of like having a bye week, right? And usually when you have a bye week, you leave for that week. And so they're not leaving, they're practicing. And so it does take a kind of a seasoned philosophy on how to best prepare your team for a Super Bowl when you have 2 weeks off. Andy Reid has done it recently quite a bit, but so is Nick Sirianni. So he probably learned a few things from a couple of years ago as well. I would say, you mentioned I haven't done it before, been in the Super Bowl, but I would imagine that a coach tries to keep this week as routine as possible, as close to what they're used to as possible. Going through the normal Wednesday, Thursday, Friday practice schedule, probably some meetings on Saturday, and then Sunday they fly. And then they get in, and then the circus begins. And then you got to just block out the noise, right? Because you're doing all these media events, and you're practicing in a weird spot. You got a weird locker room. You're staying in hotels, and the food is different, and you're not sleeping in your own bed, and all this stuff. And so you just got to withstand that week-long circus. But I think this week, really important to try to keep it as routine as possible.
The things I've heard that have worked, and I think the Broncos definitely did this for Super Bowl 50. They might have for Super Bowl 48 as well. And you got to think the Chiefs. So they probably went in Monday, cleaned up. Chiefs and Eagles went in Monday, did their normal Monday routine. But obviously their phone is going crazy from Sunday night on. Again, lots of friends and family for a lot of those players have been probably, but you still have different friends or friends that didn't make it. So your phone's going nuts. Your significant other, if you have one, your parents, and it's trying to figure out those logistics. But I think the teams that really have it dialed in, by Wednesday when they go to work, you're done with that part of it. Unless you're the person that is just kind of always
Wednesday of this week.
Wednesday of this week, you're done with the logistics. Everything else gets passed off to somebody because you're like, hey, these are.
I doubt that's the case, though. These guys are still. I mean, there's friends coming out of the woodwork. There's aunts and uncles and everybody.
But I imagine it's Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce telling these guys.
Those are the guys who have someone else to do.
No, but they're telling. But I still think, let's go down further down the list, guys. Joe Tooney, or even lesser known guys, Creed Humphrey, who I think was a rookie on that first Super Bowl, or the one a couple of years ago. Either way, they're telling their friends and family, and you can be smart about it. But you can get your 16 to 20 tickets squared away by Tuesday.
How many they have?
It's somewhere between that number
per person.
Per person.
And they pay face value for it, or they get it free?
They get to buy them. They get. Right. I think every player gets 2 free, and then you get to buy up to 20 is usually what it's been.
Yeah.
And maybe it changes a little the size of the stadium. Vegas, not a big stadium. Superdome, not the biggest state. It's an enormous stadium, but they, with the remodel, have cut the seats down. It also has like the widest, sort of like San Diego and Oakland. Nobody's running into the wall if you make it through everybody on the sideline. There's no wall right behind the bench. So I think it's try to get all that done. The part you talked about, the circus.
Yeah.
This is New Orleans. It doesn't have a lot of big fancy hotels that aren't near Bourbon Street, that aren't near the French Quarter. So both teams are staying on Bourbon Street. And I think one team staying at that big Hilton right there. Another one staying at the big Marriott. That's 4 blocks from. I stayed at the Marriott when the Broncos played there in October. So they're going to be in the mix. It's not like last year where the teams that were out at Lake Las Vegas and you had to make an effort to get down to the Strip. Everything's going to be going on. Now, that makes it easy if you're doing other stuff. I heard Travis Kelce say on his podcast, he and his brother are going to do their podcast live. They wanted to do it from a rooftop on Bourbon Street. Like, because you've
do you think they got the connections to pull that off?
They're like, oh, logistically we can't do it. I was like, well,
they'll figure it out.
You could have done it if that's really
someone will get it taken care of for you.
But
maybe Taylor could pull some strings.
That's where next week, though, because they've been through it. If they get the work done this week, you got to think that next week they can participate in make your appearances, go do whatever. You've got your walkthroughs. You got media night Monday night. You got press conferences at some point, or press availabilities Tuesday and Wednesday. Maybe even they've cut Thursday off or cut it way down. And now they don't have anything on Fridays anymore. Like they've trimmed that off. But your family gets to town typically around Thursday. So that's going to then open up, and your curfew starts getting earlier and earlier and all that. It's midnight early in the week, then it's 11, then it's 10 on Super Bowl Sunday probably.
Yeah.
So
this is a challenge for coaches because they want to put in a game plan that guys can really adhere to and can internalize and can become something that they really kind of respond to. The Philadelphia Eagles are going to be a tough task for the Chiefs, and Andy Reid knows that, and so he's like got to take the game planning part very seriously. And he obviously has. He's probably already come up with a game plan, The way the coaches work, they work weeks in advance. And so, they had assistants working on game plans for the Commanders and the Eagles, scouting these opponents and figuring out what they're going to do. And as soon as they figured out who won, they knew who their opponent was. And they're like, all right, we can throw this book away and we're going to concentrate on this one. But that part of it is a tall task. This is the best team in the world you're about to play. And so you don't want to get your path derailed by the excitement. But the fact that the Chiefs have been here so many times, they're not going to get derailed by that. And then the Eagles have been here 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think it's a pretty cool Super Bowl in that regard. These teams they're not going to be enamored with the show. They're going to be able to focus on the game, or at least should be able to, even though, generally 30% of the roster turns over year to year. And so probably, almost half the guys on the Eagles team are new. And you got probably 20% of these Chiefs team is new from last year. So there will be guys with stars in their eyes, but you follow the veterans on your team and you follow their lead. And especially the Chiefs, those veterans know exactly what to do.
You have plenty of friends that are former players, as well as friends that are just football fans, like the guys in your fantasy league that we talked about with your book. Are you getting any buzz from them or people in your life? There's plenty of, I think, residual hate towards the Chiefs. And it feels like, other than Saquon Barkley, because the Eagles is a franchise won 7 years ago, there's not that lovable loser, Bills, Lions, even Commanders from, it's been a million years and they've been such a horrible franchise, mostly because of Dan Snyder and what he's had allowed, that maybe it'll change next week when we get to Super Bowl week and people will be excited, because I do think it'll be a good game. You do have arguably the two best teams throughout most of the year, or you don't have a Cinderella. You didn't have Washington come out of nowhere, or the most banged up Lions team sneak through. So you've got clearly the best AFC team. Their record shows it. And with how the Eagles have played down the stretch, the best NFC team with Jalen Hurts looking healthy. But have you gotten that sense that there's a buzz? Like that this is excitement, or you think it'll just
this is probably not the Super Bowl that everyone wanted to see. There's definitely some Chiefs fatigue. I think that there's a contingent of people who are pretty impressed with what the Chiefs are trying to do, which is make history. 3 in a row. It's never been done before. But there's a palpable sort of disdain as well for the Chiefs at the same time. Similar to the New England Patriots dynasty?
Well, I think the difference is people's issues with the Chiefs are the refs. But
is it just that?
That's part of it. You get fatigue, I think, just about with any kind of dynasty. I think even with the Warriors, as much people love Steph Curry by the end of it, especially when they added KD, I think they like the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift thing, like certainly pop culture does. But I think that the Chiefs' fatigue is based on their greatness and the refs helping. They're not asking the refs for help. I'm not saying that Patrick doesn't look for a call. I guess there's a world where they're asking the
well, there's the thing that happens with all coaches. It's not just the Chiefs, but talking to a ref about, hey, watch this thing they're doing. We saw it on film, and a lot of the refs get greased up before the game, so to speak, by some of these conversations. Sure. by both sides, trying to prepare the refs for something they're seeing this opposing team do on film, and they want the refs to keep an eye on it. And so you just wonder, do those conversations go further or carry more weight when it's the Chiefs, because they just know each other more, because they see each other way more, because they've been in these big games together way more, and because there's no denying that Taylor Swift's influence and that whole pop culture influence helped the product last year, or at least helped the eyeballs on the game. And so you wonder if the refs are just more open to these conversations when the Chiefs have them.
I think that the difference between what the Patriots did, not once but twice, and especially the second time around, because you had gone through Spygate and all that. And it's funny because Tom Brady does seem a lot more likable away from Bill Belichick. But I think that when you look at the reason the people didn't like the Patriots, it started with Belichick and then trickled down. And because of it, Brady was a byproduct of that, because he was more of a robot. We didn't get to see a lot of his personality unless you watch his SNL or his cameos in movies, but that was about it.
Yeah.
And so you're just kind of sick of them, and there was an arrogance or a smugness. The Chiefs fatigue is like any good team fans, based on their fans, and especially here in the Mile High City, where we've seen way more Chiefs fans than we used to see.
Yeah.
You go up skiing and all of a sudden way more Chiefs jerseys than you used to see.
Is that right?
Just in general, I think you see that. And Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the NFL. And arguably the most popular. Travis Kelce's popularity. So it goes beyond that, beyond just for what they have done on the field as to why I think you don't like them. Because if you could take a step back and you're not a Broncos fan, so you're sitting in Dallas as a Cowboys fan of their own problems, you're sitting in Jacksonville, you're sitting somewhere that's not in the division, you kind of have to marvel at Patrick Mahomes' greatness. I think Broncos fans can too. It's sort of the Red Sox still appreciating Jeter kind of thing. And I think folks appreciating Brady for what he did, but Mahomes for what he's doing at this early age and how much more productive he is and has been in a short amount of time. Brady was also pretty productive, but he wasn't a prolific passer with no interceptions the way Mahomes has been until really this year. Still had no interceptions. He just didn't put up huge numbers.
Yeah.
So I think that's what factors into the hate or the fatigue.
Yeah, and just all these close games they win. And they've won 17, I think, straight one-score games. And that has made people feel like the refs are involved, because how do you do that? But it's also like, okay, so I look at it like a pitcher, like a really good baseball pitcher, understands the strike zone and understands how to get it as close to that edge as possible with it still being called a strike. I feel like the Chiefs understand the strike zone with the refs a lot better than other teams do, and are able to work the edges of the strike zone when it comes to the rules, when it comes to, little calls in the game. Obviously, you don't like to see Patrick Mahomes gaming the system that's trying to protect quarterbacks, but at the same time, change the freaking rule if quarterbacks can do that. And so in some ways, I like that Patrick Mahomes has brought that out in the light, that this is a subjective rule that can be gamed by smart quarterbacks. And so maybe you should change the freaking rule. Maybe there shouldn't be a baseball slide when you're a runner. Make them a runner. Don't try to protect them like that, because it's actually making everything more dangerous than otherwise. Now, there are videos going around on social media right now, all the times in the games against the Bills that the ball was spotted short for the Bills and not so for the Chiefs. Is that a real thing?
I think that, and I saw where somebody said there's a chance that the line judge just isn't very good. I think you need to look at that line judge and see, has he done that throughout the year? And if in every other game that he's reffed, he got it dead on, then I think you really have something. The yellow line isn't 100% accurate, but it still gives you enough.
How are you just not very good as a line judge when in the grandest stage in the NFL? I mean, isn't everyone out there supposed to be really good at their job?
They're supposed to be, and it's supposed to be better crews, because they do assemble these all-star crews, especially for the championship games and the playoffs, where they're bringing people.
Did Donald Trump sign an executive order about this? Is that one of the orders that he signed at the very beginning?
It's hard to keep track of, but you
get these refs right.
You mentioned Donald Trump, and it made me think of Mahomes talking about gaming the system, or not gaming, just taking advantage. When Donald Trump ran the first time, and Dave Chappelle talked about it on SNL, that he told you what he was going to do, and he did. He's the one that said,
yeah, but Patrick Mahomes doesn't tell you he's about to freaking fake a slide and get hit.
Versus Donald Trump saying that the reason that he's able to get around the tax laws is because of what the laws are that are in place. Yeah. When he said that,
so change the laws if you want to change it, right?
And so change the rules. And I think that, I do think we're going to see that talked about a lot. We'll find out as we get closer to the owners' meeting. It'll probably come up some at the combine as well. But the competition committee meets and they present the rules at the league meeting in late March.
What would you ask Patrick Mahomes in order to get him to answer that question? If you had an opportunity to ask him about his playing style, and whether he goads defenders into hitting him.
I think that's the way that you have to ask it. And if you come in accusatory, you know how that is. You're gonna get a shitty answer.
Yeah.
But if you come in and ask, hey, the rules are what they are. Do you look for the opportunity or a vulnerability in the way the game is reffed or legislated to take advantage of the opportunity that's presented before you, like the slide or even the fake slide or whatever it may be, or holding onto the ball to the last second to take a shot right as you step out of bounds, trying to time that up?
And you know what's funny? Because like every position does it in their own way. You know, a defensive, an outside linebacker who's rushing the quarterback and gets held, he sells it, right?
Yeah, of course.
You know, the offsides penalties,
linemen holding or blockers holding.
Yes, a block in the back. You're gonna like everybody's sort of doing that, selling it a little bit. And it started in basketball, and it happens in soccer.
I think it started in soccer.
No, it did start in soccer.
It started in soccer.
You know what's the funny thing about the flopping in soccer? Men do it and women don't do it.
Yeah.
Women don't flop.
Nope.
Why is that?
I don't know. Because they have more.
Are they tougher?
They have more integrity.
Are they tougher?
Yes, they're tougher.
Because like women
seen your
basketball
wife-
players are like, I mean, that game is so tough compared to men's basketball. Men are always flopping around and trying to draw fouls and you got a hand on my
Yeah,
arm.
women are tough. They give birth
But
to
women don't
kids.
do that.
No, they get, and neither does Lionel Messi. He
Wait,
didn't
did
kick
you say
flops.
women give birth to kids?
At least that's what I've been told.
Wow,
I mean, my wife did it 3 times. Your wife has done it twice.
twice. Yeah.
So,
So you're saying you couldn't handle that pain if God had given you that ability, Brandon?
well, I don't know. I think that then your biometrics are different from the beginning. Like your body is wired differently.
What about if you and a woman put your arms together like this, and then this is an old like toughness game. I guess it depends on the person, but you put a lit cigarette between the two of you on it and see who moves their arm first.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never played that game.
All right. Well, we should play that on the air
Okay.
with Liv when next time she
We'll
comes.
do it with Liv, if that
Liv,
sounds.
what do you say? Does that sound fun?
It feels like, I don't know. Liv might bow out quicker. Although she's got some cool ink that she endured that pain. I don't have any tattoos.
You don't?
Uh-oh.
Why not?
She's never had any that I really wanted. My wife has a couple, and so I may get the same song lyrics that she has down her spine.
Taylor Swift or
Not Taylor Swift, Avett Brothers.
she
Avett
has
Brothers
it
lyrics.
down her spine?
Down her spine.
Are you going to do that too?
I'd probably do it like here in this area
On the side?
Yeah, which I heard
Like,
pretty painful.
like in cursive?
uh,
Like really small so no one can read
It
it?
is kind of in cursive. No, some people can read it. I mean, but
I always love like the people who have like the paragraph in cursive on the side and it's so small, but you can't really read it, but it's all flowery. Then when you get close, it just says, "This is a paragraph written in cursive on my side. It's supposed to be small enough that you can't read it, but now that you're close enough, back the fuck up."
back off. The ones I thought would be cool. I always thought, especially if I was a quarterback or a pitcher, flames on your arm to just do it in general. Whatever. If you're going to be that guy, fine. I'm not. But if you were a pitcher and you had
'cause
flames
you're
on your
throwing
arm,
heat?
yeah, and you're throwing heat,
Wow.
I think that's cool. If you had Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes kind of arm, that would be cool.
See, but what started off as a good idea and would feel good while you're young, as you got older and you started to get
Yeah, and
washed up, people would be like, "Oh, Mr. Flamethrower, huh?
Yeah, like,
Need some more
there's a-
gas in that thing."
89, huh? Well, like young kid's throwing 101.
Yeah.
There was a pitcher here, Joe, and I don't remember his last name. He was a reliever his whole career. His entire arm, one big sleeve with a million different things, but his pitching arm was totally clean. He's like, I go through enough pain in that arm. I don't need to add anything to it that's going to bother it.
Yeah.
Women are tougher than men, to go back to your original,
Yeah.
to your original question. At least that's.
Yeah, and they are. I agree with that. And ultimately, Patrick Mahomes, to circle back to him and his gaming the system and pretending things hurt more than they do. And I think there's an incentive for a lot of athletes to do that, to goad the refs into calling a flag or blowing the whistle on something that probably didn't hurt, but you're pretending it did. That's supposed to be against the ethos of the sport of football. Football's about pain. Football's about how much pain you can endure. Get back up and get in the huddle. I'm showing you, like, I cannot show you that I'm hurt. I can't show you that this makes me feel owie. But if you do that, it's sort of, I don't know, I think it's antithetical to the game. And to compound, to viewership is down 9% this year, Brandon, in the NFL.
Which is interesting because it's still the most watched whatever, but it's down.
But why is that? Do you think this has anything to do with it?
I do think that maybe there is some Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift fatigue.
What was the biggest story in the NFL this year? Jaden Daniels, maybe?
I think ultimately the biggest story was Lamar and Josh, who's going to be the MVP.
Yeah.
You can argue it's Saquon Barkley, and that would be cool if he wins it. He's not going to. It's going to be one of those quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
But it was
but
like
if he wins Super Bowl MVP, he can be like, screw you all.
Well, that's how Joker was 2 years ago. But 1A, 1B, because it was who's going to win MVP, and can either of them beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs? And the answer was no. I'm not saying the Ravens couldn't have. They didn't get that opportunity because they couldn't even beat the Bills. And clearly the Bills, if you want to involve the refs one way or the other, fine. But the point is the Chiefs are getting ready for Super Bowl 59, and the Bills are skipping the Pro Bowl and going to Cancun.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some fatigue there because Jaden Daniels was exciting, but I think there's also some like residual. Well, we don't want the Commanders to be good just yet, other than it's eating Dan Snyder alive, which is funny. And there was that ESPN story last week that their success is really bothering him. Now he's stuck in England.
Oh yeah, of course,
crimes in America. But I don't know if there were too many other like Bo Nix and the Broncos were exciting here.
Mm-hmm.
And football people that were going to watch every game anyway, that aren't part of that 9% drop off, they're like, oh, let's see what Bo Nix and Sean Payton, like they were in on a story like that, or some of the other obvious football story, but there aren't attention grabbing stories this year, which is part of what I think leads into why this isn't the most exciting Super Bowl on paper right now, versus if it were Lions and one of the AFC teams, or Lions Bills specifically.
Aaron Rodgers was supposed to be the story of the year. And
he's a bit of an enigma to me.
And that enigma Netflix special was gearing up for this run that he was supposed to go on. And the fact that it didn't, it fell flat. You know, the AFC Championship game was not supposed to be Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes and the same old result. It was supposed to be Aaron Rodgers versus Patrick Mahomes, and Aaron Rodgers dethroning, or at least taking the crown back and facing the Eagles in the Super Bowl. That would have been a bigger story. Don't you think?
100%.
Oh, maybe not. I mean, it's this three-peat.
Well, so, but let's unfortunately, as much as we love talking to Aaron Rodgers, the conversation gets more interesting if Patrick Mahomes, before age 30, not only has been to a 5th Super Bowl, but wins his 4th, because he's kind of tied with Brady Super Bowl wins at this point in their career. He's been to now what'll be 2 more. Brady was 3 for 3, and then Brady had that drop off for a couple of years till they got back with the.
It was a decade, I think, where he didn't win one.
But he at least went to 2 more. They lost to the Giants both times. But if Mahomes wins this, and certainly there's no reason to think that they can't, it's sort of like still having the LeBron MJ conversation. Like LeBron could still win another championship or 2 if he changes teams. But he's not retiring. So while he's still playing, there's not a finality to it. But to get into where does Patrick Mahomes rank all time, if you want to say I want to draft him first, there's people right now that would draft John Elway and Dan Marino ahead of Tom Brady. If you were to go to all the personnel people across the world.
Because Tom Brady played till he was 45. And he won, a couple of those at the end there.
Yeah.
And he was on a team that was very good for very long, was able to stay together with the same coach and was able to.
Let me frame it like this. What will Patrick Mahomes have to do in his career to be considered the best quarterback of all time? Because if he plays long enough, and I don't mean 45, but if he plays at least 38, 39, based on the way the game has changed, he'll pass Brady in yards and touchdowns.
I really think he's got to win 7.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, just because or at least to be able to make it definitive. Because that's the ultimate test, is the hardware you got.
What if he wins 4 in a row? Not that anybody wants that. I get it. And Chiefs fans, Mahomes fans, wins this year, wins next year, and then never wins again. But he won 4 in a row, 5 overall.
Not my goat.
Okay.
I mean, I think he's 3rd right now.
Behind
Joe Montana.
Joe Montana too?
Yeah.
Is that a Niners bias, or is that
maybe a little bit? But Joe was 4 for 4 in Super Bowls.
So was Terry Bradshaw.
Never threw an interception in a Super Bowl.
I'm sure Terry probably did.
Joe got put out pretty early. I mean, he was pretty banged up. He had some significant injuries that affected his career. And I think Joe Montana's body of work when he was in his prime was pretty damn good. And I think it was more impressive than what Patrick Mahomes has done, because Patrick Mahomes took over for a very good team. Yeah. Joe Montana and Bill Walsh started on a really bad team. This was a laughingstock 49er team that they took over and turned into a Super Bowl champion within a couple of years. Whereas Patrick Mahomes took over a team that was a 10-win team every year. That was a roster that was already built by Andy Reid, who had already gone to a Super Bowl on another team, who knew exactly what he was doing and built this team up. And the last piece that they needed was that quarterback to put him over. And the 49ers dynasty was not built that way. Joe Montana was involved in the building of that dynasty. And when he got the chance on the largest stage, he shined like no one else has ever shined. 11 touchdowns to 0 interceptions in 4 Super Bowls. That's pretty freaking good. I don't think Patrick Mahomes has shown that kind of dominance quite yet.
I do want to look up his Super Bowl stats, though. Because, well, it was a disaster against the Bucs, but a lot
he threw 2 interceptions. He's thrown like 5 interceptions in Super Bowls.
A lot of that had to do with the tackles that he had.
Yeah.
In that game.
Yeah. But you're always going to have, contingencies on your team, guys banged up, things that aren't perfect. And those 49er teams were pretty dominant. And obviously there's a little bit of bias because I was a 49er fan at that time. But
I want to throw one more hypothetical.
Yeah.
So Mahomes wins not only 4 in a row, keeps playing, putting up stats, Pro Bowls every year. Then at the end of his career, wins a 6th title. So he has 6 and Brady has 7, but he passes Brady in every record book and doesn't have to play to 45. He's doing it right around 39, 40, 41. and in his sort of John Elway style wins one and is like, I'm done. Body's beaten up.
I think 6 would probably do it.
If he has 6 and all those other records that he's
Yeah.
likely going to have if he stays healthy, because he's just averaging more of everything because of the way the game.
Question is, will Andy Reid stay with him that whole time? Because, you know, Brady, up until he left, he decided to leave. He had Bill Belichick and that structure, that system there working, clicking at a high level. If Andy Reid, you know, decides in 3 years from now, if he wins, well, shoot, maybe he retires after this year. Probably
He
not.
just signed a new contract, and
he did?
talking to people close to it, we know his one son passed away. His other son is either in jail or just out of jail, but that son's family lives in Kansas City, and so his grandkids are there. But this is kind of all he does. And so it's what probably keeps him busy enough to not have to think about his son, who he lost to a drug overdose, and the other son who had a DUI leaving the facility, who had seemed to have turned his life around and permanently affected the young kid that was in that car for their entire lives. And so I don't think he's walking away just yet. Maybe keep an eye on when Travis Kelce walks away. Nothing needs Kelce, but like, how many more years does Kelce have? It sounds like he's going to play at least one more.
Is he?
That was some of the rumblings, because he's got the podcast of $100 million. He's got his own $100 million from playing. His girlfriend has plenty of money. It's not about money, but sort of the idea that you can only do this for so long and you're still going to have the rest of your life.
I don't know. I feel like the 3-peat is a great time to walk away. If you're thinking about it, because the 4-peat.
But if you're thinking about the 3-peat, then you're thinking,
let's do it again. Let's do it every year.
Yeah.
Let's just dominate the world. I'm sure there's a temptation to do that.
We do have one other comment other than Liv saying hi, and y'all can throw more comments up there. Maybe we'll react. But B wants to know, do you think we have a chance to win the cup? So I can answer that one of two ways. I'm not sure which cup you're talking about, but
Stanley, I imagine.
If you're talking about Lord Stanley's Cup, it probably went down with Miko Rantanen being traded. But you can also check in with our friends on Off Ice. And if you're asking about any other types of cups, then sure.
Yeah.
Why not? Let's transition though to Broncos and their coaching staff being not picked apart, but certainly being plucked. Some of their key staffers. They moved on from, well, Mike Westhoff moved on his own, and then Ben Kotwika is asked not to come back. They also let go of inside linebackers coach Greg Minuski, which I didn't think there was a problem with inside linebacker play necessarily. They were beaten in coverage sometimes, but that happens to just about every linebacker anyway. But maybe that's whatever. Sean sending some sort of message to that it was a top 5 defense. He can do whatever he wants. The idea that he would fire Vance Joseph would seem crazy. He got Jim Leonard to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw Declan Doyle, who I didn't realize he's a tight ends coach. I didn't realize he's only 28, 29 years old. He started coaching in college at Iowa. His dad was a Iowa strength coach for a long time, but he was like in college with Josie Jewell and guys like that. He gets the offensive coordinator job with the Bears, but we know Ben Johnson's calling the plays. So what's to say about Declan Doyle that this young, he's able to join another young head coach?
Just
clearly at Sean Payton's recommendation.
Yeah, just another one of those pipeline things. I mean, you get in, they like you as a person, you like to grind, you're able to articulate their message. You're kind of a yes man. I mean, it's not like you're coming up with your own schemes at 28. The reason why you get pulled into that situation is because you're, for lack of a better term, you're good at following orders and basically, here's our plan, Declan. And now, he's able to articulate it to the guys. I would say that, look, the tight ends did not perform at a very high level this year. And I'm not saying that's Declan Doyle's fault, because you can only do so much when the game plan is what it is. But they're going to have to get another tight end, or at least kind of get some more production in that room, whatever it might be. And so I imagine, as much as they might have liked Declan Doyle, some new blood might be good in that room, because you might be a really good, talented communicator as a coach. You might know what you're talking about, but we got to light a fire under these guys and get them to be more involved in the offense. And whether that's adding a new piece, a new player, I'm sure they will, or also just some new energy in there. I mean, you remember Zach, whatever his name, Azani.
Yeah, Zach Azani.
The
wideout coach.
Yeah, the worst receiver coach in the history of the league, but one of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know the rankings, but
he's had like one 1,000-yard receiver in his entire career. And it
hadn't gone great with Deontay Johnson a year ago and George Pickens this year.
No. And so, but You go out and
I
practice.
guess he was with the Jets last year.
Yeah,
Jets
he was
last year, and then Steelers this
So
year.
maybe Garrett Wilson got there. I don't know.
Yeah, Garrett Wilson's had 3,000-yard season.
3,000, huh? That's a lot.
Three 1,000-yard seasons.
No, but if you go out to Broncos practice when Coach Azani was here, you'd think that this guy's doing it. He's got all sorts. He's got folding chairs out there and tennis balls and PVC pipes. They're doing all these cool drills. Well, guess what? There ain't going to be no PVC pipes or folding chairs or tennis balls on a football field. And that was
there shouldn't be.
No. And that was reflected in the performance of the receivers while he was their receiver coach. He may have been inspirational. He may have had a Twitter account. He may have had some cool drills. He may have been real loud out there, but these guys were not performing, in my opinion, up to their potential. Now you get a guy who's the receiver coach for the Broncos now, Kerry Colbert, who was a former teammate of mine. None of the bells and whistles, but a ton of experience. He played the position at the highest level, and all of a sudden, he's got this group of no names, of no playmakers, as everyone said, playing pretty damn well. And I think you got to think about, it's not just, your pipeline guys who are going to be successful in those roles. Sometimes a little bit of new blood can help the room out. And I'm hoping the same happens with the tight ends.
I guess we'll see what they do at tight end. They're now going to be looking officially for a new head special teams coach. Chris Banjo not getting promoted here. Other teams were interested in talking to him. The Jets end up hiring him. Aaron Glenn, who was, if the math is right, around Banjo when he was a DB with the Saints, but mostly a special teams player for the 3 years he was there. AG brings Banjo in now to come coordinate the special teams, not just be an assistant. And this dude walked off the field. It was pretty remarkable that not just Davis Webb, who gets a lot of attention, but Davis Webb started a game a couple of years ago in the final game of the year, right before the playoffs, and then Daniel Jones started in the playoffs for the Giants, and then is the Broncos quarterbacks coach. Normally you start as a quality control guy and work your way up, and maybe you're lucky to have a Declan Doyle, Sean McVay kind of trajectory where in your late 20s, early 30s, you're getting these.
So how did he end up on Sean Payton's staff?
Banjo?
No, Davis.
So
did he know him from New Orleans?
No, not at all. Davis decided he was done playing, even though he started a game and had been a backup for 6 or 7 years in the league in Buffalo and New York. And Davis's dad is a coach, and there's plenty of stories out there. Apparently Davis was a heck of a hockey player too, and I haven't ever really talked to him about that. But Davis, a good college quarterback, whatever. His dad, high school coach in Texas. Davis on Fridays would take the starting quarterback, whether it was Josh Allen, I think some, but certainly with Daniel Jones, and walk through the whole game plan in the indoor practice facility with the Giants away from the coaches. And so whether it was Brian Daboll or the other, I think Mike Kafka was QB coach, they were like, great, go have fun. So Davis knew he was just kind of done playing and wanted to get into coaching. That gets passed along to Sean. He comes out in interviews, and then Sean's told the story about how he pulled up every single game plan he's had since high school in an Excel. He had them all in Excel files. So he's kept track of all those. And so then as he's on his way back to the airport, Sean's like, what are we doing? Let's just hire him. And they turn around, they bring him back. So Davis steps right off the field. Banjo decided he wasn't sure whether he was going to play or not. Reach out to Sean, I think, just to talk to him.
Yeah.
Sean's like, if you want to coach, I'll put you on my staff. And so he walked right off the field where he was playing special teams and was there with Zach Allen and Vance Joseph down in Arizona, right into a role. And 2 years later, he is now at 34, a head special teams coach there with the Jets. And then the other one who kind of went the traditional route, Johnny Morton, who played at Western Michigan and broke his way through college and into the league, got in the league and bounced back and forth, was at USC a little bit, but was
what position?
He was a wideout. Doesn't look, he looks a lot more like a tight end now, but he's a wideout. But so he's been coaching since the late 90s and is now just for the second time in his entire career in the NFL. And he did call plays for Pete Carroll in the early 2000s. And there is some kind of crossover. It goes to the San Fran tree with Seifert and Walsh, but with Gruden, with Sean Payton, with Pete Carroll, who was there for a couple of years. And, now Pete's back with the Raiders, and some familiar faces are joining that staff that have been part of the Raiders. People that were with the Raiders, like Johnny Morton with Gruden. He was in Detroit, and then now he's here with Sean. He was with Sean before.
Was he the pass game coordinator here?
He was the passing game coordinator. He now gets to call the plays. He called plays in 2017 for Todd Bowles with the Jets. That was the only time he's called plays in the NFL.
He wasn't calling plays here.
He was not calling plays here. Sean Payton was.
So I'll tell you, losing coaches is always it's a mixed bag. Sometimes, you like the guy. Sometimes you're happy to see him go. I think probably some of these offensive players are happy to see Johnny Mo go because he was always yelling at him.
He yells a lot.
He doesn't stop yelling. He doesn't stop talking. And for a player you don't love that guy.
No.
I mean, I was out there at training camp, and Johnny Mo. He's got a lot of skins on the wall, and he's going to be fine. He's a smart guy, and he's had a lot of success, and he's got a Super Bowls, and boom, boom, boom. But he's annoying as shit. And what you hate as a player is when like you have a coach who just never stops, and he's always coaching you. He's always coaching you up. No matter what you're doing, he wants to see you do it better. And there is something that's cool about a coach who's always asking to be better, right? Keeping the standard high. But here's an example of Johnny Mo going too far. Okay. Training camp practice. The quarterbacks are working on throwing. They're trying to hit those nets, right? They're doing their little drops. They're trying to hit the nets. And they need receivers behind them in case they miss the nets. Johnny Mo was coaching up the receivers in the back on how to stand and what to do. And he's yelling at his own receivers who are standing behind the nets, catching errant balls by the quarterbacks. And these receivers are just body language is like, oh God. Like, and him and Marvin Mims got into it on the sideline because he was riding Marvin Mims over some bullshit. So I know these players aren't going to be sad to see Johnny Mo go because sometimes a coach who yells all the time is not fun.
We know Dan Campbell is a fiery guy. We know Aaron Glenn's a fiery guy. I feel like you can get away with that more on defense. I do think about Adam Gase as an offensive coordinator, or I remember when you were still on the team and Jay Cutler and who is your young OC?
Jeremy Bates.
He and Jeremy Bates are yelling at each other in front of the media, coming like yelling at each other. That's different than.
Well, Jeremy Bates was a good dude. He wasn't always like that. He was a passionate guy.
But Johnny Mo, it's like there's not an off switch.
No.
And I think that's okay as a position coach. It can grind on your guys, but it's not affecting the entire side of a ball. If you're like that,
it makes it miserable.
If you're like that as a play caller,
practice.
and if their offense was awesome under Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
So if their offense isn't awesome, then I'd be concerned if I'm Dan Campbell that Johnny Mo isn't the right fit. Based on his personality, he could be one and done, right? If it doesn't go well, because we know you got Gibbs, you got St. Brown, Jared
quite
Goff,
a risk,
a great O-line.
Yeah, for a team that it seems so. And he was there though a couple of years ago, right? Johnny Mo was in Detroit, so they know who he is. But he's dealing with, trying to replace Ben Johnson, who was their leader, chemistry wise as well. And clearly, like, wanted to stick around, had opportunities to be a head coach, stuck around to try to make it all the way. They weren't able to, but Johnny Mo stepping into that. So that's a challenge. But I want to mention one more thing about special teams. Special teams coach is not as important as it used to be because of the kickoff and the kickoff return. It's not as dynamic of a play. It doesn't require as much, in my opinion. And I'm not in those rooms, so I don't really know.
It's at 57% more returns this year.
57% more returns. Okay. Well, how many? I thought it was a really boring play. I thought it was I think it's a mistake. Maybe the competition committee will review it.
No, they will. It was a 1-year trial, so they're going to review it automatically.
I think they just should move the ball back 5 yards and then just kick the ball.
And that could be what it is, and maybe change some of the penalties and also take away the one where there's a penalty on the kick. You can kick it out of bounds and it goes.
Yeah, people don't understand the rule. People don't understand the play. It's weird. It doesn't feel right. And I guess if you did it for long enough,
it just becomes the norm,
to feel right. But I don't know. To me, and of course, this is the bias of a special teams player, but the first play of the game should be exciting.
Yeah.
It should be like because what I always loved, and I always talk about this all the time, but I was on kickoff. So I was, back there in the huddle while they're playing, we ready, we ready. And the fans are starting, and then we spread out, and then the refs drop the hand or blow the whistle, and then the kicker drops the hands, and we just start sprinting, dude, as fast as we possibly can. And then the boom, boom, and the kick, and then everyone in the crowd, and then you hear it at first, but then you stop, and all you hear is yourself and your pads clicking in your helmet. You're enclosed in a bubble of your own solitude as you're screaming down the field, trying to make a play to start it off for your team, okay? And you feel the adrenaline in the stadium, and if you go down there and make a play, and everybody's screaming, then your defense runs on the field, and they're hyped up because of what you just did in advance of them coming out to do their work. There's none of that anymore.
No.
It's
You're
like
just looking.
Oh,
yeah,
exactly. You have to wait. No, you have to wait till he catches.
Right.
So
you have to
yeah. So you see it kick, but you're just standing there,
and then you
over your head, and then okay, he caught it. Okay, he's coming out. All right.
The other part I hate, and we're going to Super Bowl week in New Orleans, and I was at that game in Miami. The sneak onside kick is always awesome.
Yeah.
And taking that completely off the table, I think sucks. So hopefully they find a way to bring that back. The one final coaching thing, the Broncos, we think will hire Darren Rizzi if he doesn't get the Saints job. The Saints job, we think Kellen Moore is going to get that job. That's why it's been so quiet and people are taking their names out of it. I find it fascinating that Vance Joseph, who had what I was told from people in the know, a really good interview with the Jets and then a good conversation with the Raiders, didn't even talk to the Saints when you know Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis are best friends. And Sean clearly helped. I'm sure if Woody Johnson called him or Mike Tannenbaum or Rick Spielman, Sean, I'm sure talked up Aaron Glenn. And he obviously talked up Darren Muji to AG. And then you got to know that George talked up Muj to Rick Spielman, who was part of that hiring process because they worked together forever. And obviously Declan Doyle, I'm sure Ben Johnson got, the stamp of approval from Sean there. Johnny Moe, yes, he knows Dan Campbell, but that doesn't mean that. And so it's just curious that Vance Joseph didn't even get a chance to talk to the Saints or hasn't yet. I guess there's always a world where he does. Because you think that if Sean makes that call, like, hey, Mickey, you really need to talk to Vance. That
why would he want him?
And Vance is from New Orleans.
Why would he want him to leave?
I guess that's a great
maybe
point.
He doesn't want. Maybe he's not, hitting the telephones for him because he wants him to stick around. He's building something special. You mentioned the top 5 defense, man. Why dismantle that by taking your leader out and then put in a whole new system? I think.
I mean, they kept Jim Leonard around, but maybe it's still just as, hey, Vance is going to get a job by next year kind of thing.
Maybe.
Or the defense isn't going to be as good and we might fire him. So stick around. That's what it feels like. One of those two things.
Vance was not a good head coach when he was here, and it wasn't all his fault, but 100%. He didn't have a lot of success. So there might be teams that are reluctant to kind of give him that opportunity again, even though a lot of our most successful coaches in the history of this sport have had disastrous first tenures as head coaches. Mike Shanahan did.
Shanahan, Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll. Bill Belichick's teams were trending up, but still wasn't great in Cleveland.
Right.
Pete Carroll with the Patriots wasn't great.
Yeah. So you got to learn. You got to learn what not to do, and
also he didn't get to pick his offensive staff here, so you have to know that.
Yeah. I'm
picking my offensive staff, and I think real football people know how involved he was in the day-to-day with Cliff Kingsbury. That they were. I don't want to call them co-head coaches, but that's not the worst description of how they handled things in the building with the logistics of running a team. All right. So then final thing we want to get to after we tell you about Trusted American Mortgage, it's going to be about this Broncos draft. But I know you spent a lot of money at the holidays. I did. Everybody did. Well, right now, go to trustedamerican.com and see how their mortgage specialist can help you save money, maybe lower your interest rate because you wouldn't mind some relief there.
Saving a little money.
And with rates, we hope dropping with the new president, we'll see. Nobody better than Trusted American to help you with that. So you can go to trustedamerican.com. You can scan the QR code that's right above Nate's head. If you're watching us, if you're listening to us, trustedamerican.com, because they want to help you at the very least cover the cost of your appraisal, which is about a $650 value. So right now, again, click that QR code or go to trustedamerican.com. Oh, it's above my head now. Yeah. Go to trustedamerican.com and see how they can help you save money today.
Didn't the president sign another executive order about dropping the interest rate?
I hope so.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Be great. That would be great. I don't know if that would
do it
also happen either, but I'm in for that. Then I'll go to Trusted American and lower my interest rate again because we did do that once during COVID. So
look at that holy diver. I just read BK's cue card. It says run the ball.
It does say run the ball. It does say draft. It says draft overview because I think as much as I love mock drafts, and this is what you got to love about the internet, as I knew we were going to talk about the draft. You've got the East-West Shrine game tonight, I believe, on NFL Network. That game's in Dallas. Then you've got on Saturday
the East-West Shrine game.
The Senior Bowl. You did?
Yeah.
So back then,
it was only D3 guy. It was in San Francisco,
okay.
And actually hurt my hamstring that week, and so I didn't get to fully play in the game. It was
that
awful,
sucks.
Awful experience. I tore that thing in practice, and I actually pulled it a couple days before the week started, just running routes with my college coach, just getting ready for this week because this was my chance. I was a D3 player. These are all obviously the best D1 players. So I was like, all right, this is my only chance to impress scouts. And I went in there with a bum hamstring, tried to conceal it, and it ended up tearing pretty good during practice. But a real quick story to relate from that. It was my first contact with NFL scouts, and it was strange because there was a ballroom, and They had us all stripped down to our underwear outside the ballroom and wait in a line. And then one at a time, we had to go into the ballroom and walk up on the stage where there was a man up on the stage with a scale, and you step on the scale and he goes, Brandon Krisztal. Wait, no, wide receiver. No, I'm sorry. Defensive back, Brandon Krisztal.
Cornerback.
172 pounds.
And
then
height, 5'08".
And they measure the hand. And then you know what else they measured? Not that, but they wanted to, because everyone in the crowd was just sitting there staring at your body. And we had to then, after we got weighed and measured, walk to the end of the stage and stand there for 30 seconds and then turn around and stand there for 30 seconds and then walk off the stage, Brandon. And they tell you, don't look back when you're walking off. Don't look back. And I made the mistake of looking back. And you know what I saw?
Who was behind you?
The clipboards rising in their laps. It was a little awkward. It was a weird feeling. It was like, oh, I'm a stripper now.
I went to that one day at the Senior Bowl, because I've been to the Senior Bowl a handful of times, probably 5 times, and only once did I go to that weigh-in. And they do it 8:30 in the morning before the first practice, which is on Tuesdays at the Senior Bowl, and it's wild. I mean, because there's 100 players, they have 50 on each team, and it's just and they're like so and so, Western Michigan, 6071, and so you're like 6 foot 7 inches, 0.1, whatever. 320, whatever. And it's very weird. Like, we've all seen that Tom Brady,
market, man.
We've seen that Tom Brady photo from the combine where shirtless.
Yep.
Okay.
And then we had to go into this room and take the New York Giants personality test. They were the only team to do this one test. It's like 300 tests. I'm sorry, 300 questions.
Man.
And they're ridiculous questions like, what do you prefer, Jell-O or pudding? What do you prefer when you're thirsty, a beer or a soda? Who would you rather, like there was
dumb enough to answer beer if that's the question. Although maybe they're like,
soda, like, he likes sugar, or is he like
right?
A cold beer with the fellas? It's like, would you rather be like a masculine hairdresser or a feminine fireman or something? Like, where are we here, man? And why is this part of the thing? So there's just a lot of weird stuff that these guys have to do, including subjecting themselves to all these interviews with individual teams. And it's just a very strange process. But the week of practice is the most important part.
We saw a couple guys at Senior Bowl all pull out of the game. That kid from Marshall, pass rusher, that video's out there of him destroying O-linemen. And I remember Javon Kinlaw did that a couple years ago. He kicked ass for 2 days and then skipped the game.
Yeah, the scouts will come to the practices and they won't go to the games. You never know what's going to happen in the game, but those practices are really important, and you can feel it. You could feel all the energy and the eyeballs, and everyone's taking notes on you, and then, sizing you up as you walk up and whispering to each other. It's a pretty interesting process. But the Broncos have, some things to think about, because they have a lot of young, promising players. And the question is, do we replace some of these guys because they didn't show enough in year 1 or year 2? You're always trying to upgrade your roster, but how much of these players who showed us some things in 2024 are going to stick around or be replaced?
Well, and you said 30% of the roster is going to turn over. That just happens. So again, the East-West Shrine games tonight. Shedeur Sanders practiced all week. He's not playing in the game. He didn't really need to.
How did he do in practice?
I think he did fine. A lot better than his brother. His brother was getting cooked,
Shiloh?
I guess. All the Buffs went to the East-West Shrine game. And I think it's because 1 or 2 of them could have gotten into the Senior Bowl, and they just wanted to stick together. So I think LeJonte Wester's down there, and I think Will Shepard's down there.
Do you think that's cool that they're doing it all differently? And like, we're different.
I think as long as coaches, there were obviously going to be less GMs and coaches, although I saw where Mike Borgonzi, the new Titans GM, talked to Shedeur last week, and they hold the first pick. So they're going to get around it by starting it Thursday and then starting workouts Tuesday. You get in Mobile, you can get to both and talk to whoever. But a couple of things about that. I don't think anybody really cares. Senior Bowl is better competition. So that would be the thing. Like, I wanted to see you against that corner from South Carolina or whatever. Yeah. But so that game will be on tonight if you want to watch a little football. And then Saturday you get the Senior Bowl, but the last practice is probably happening as we speak. My favorite thing and the dumbest thing out there, but I just laugh, for everybody that wants to know, and I'm using Devin Neal as the example. Really good running back at Kansas, beat P.L. Sayers records, June Henley, all-time leading rusher, from Lawrence, Kansas. A day 3 pick, most likely. Good player, but there's plenty of great running backs that have come in day 3.
Devin Neal,
the 3rd round at the high is kind of where he's graded right now. The kid, obviously, Genty is way ahead of him, and the kid from North Carolina. Regardless, I saw our pal C. Salami tweet, Devin Neal confirms he talked to the Broncos. every team talks to every player just about.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see it when we go to the combine too. Hey, have you met with the Broncos? No, but I think I'm going to. And it matters at certain positions, but reporting that a player's met with the team, especially in this process where it's not as formal as it is at the combine, it's gotten more formal at the Senior Bowl where they've tried to corral some of the craziness of it. Because it used to be you wouldn't know if the person's an agent, although most of these guys have agents, a manager, a marketing person, a scout, a GM. I mean, obviously, you know that. And anyone could talk to these guys. They're just around this hotel in Mobile. And so you walk by and there is like, oh, there's Baker Mayfield talking to John Schneider or whatever.
Right,
And you're like,
right.
why is he talking to the Seahawks GM
Yeah.
when they've got Russ? They're not picking anywhere near the top. But
Maybe just saying hi, you know?
no, I mean, it was clearly like a formal chat, but it's just overreacting or reacting at all to a certain player talking to your favorite team is about the dumbest part of this process.
Yeah, well, you know who the Broncos never talked to was Pastor T. Because they knew they wanted to draft him, right? So they're like, don't look at him. Don't talk to him. We're not going to go work him out. We're not going to like show any interest in him because we're going to get him. And we don't want people to think that. You remember last year at the end of I know the Broncos worked out Bo Nix, you know, after his senior day or whatever, but they didn't talk about him. And there was a lot of stuff.
Sean wanted everybody talking about JJ McCarthy and
JJ McCarthy and Michael Penix and like, you know, all those guys. Yeah, let's talk about those guys, how good those guys are. But Bo, the guy we really want, do not mention his name. You remember even like the couple days before the draft, Peyton Manning came on the local media, or actually national media, and was talking about JJ McCarthy, how they really like him, how he had the. They're not going to draft JJ, and they're not even going to go after him. They would have had to trade up to get him, but they didn't want him. They wanted Bo. And so there's a lot of gamesmanship happening right now.
It is, and I don't know if I've gotten credit for it, but I can't find anybody that said it before I said it first. It is truly the start, especially when Super Bowl ends, the start of the lying season, where you can only trust so much because you get into it with free agency and you're at the combine.
Well, I heard your boy Cecil say that, lying season.
Yeah, he got that one for me.
He stole it from you. You should trademark that.
I didn't have a chance to, but if you Google, like when I tweeted it or search it.
You can Google when you tweeted
you
it?
search on Twitter, lying season. You can't find anyone that used that term before I did in however many years ago.
You should write a book called Lying Season.
Maybe I will, because this is all really
I
silly.
will buy it, but I won't read it unless it becomes a New York Times bestseller.
Okay.
And it becomes critically acclaimed.
Okay. Though that's fair. I'll get to that after I get to this. When you look at what the Broncos need, people talk running back, people talk tight end.
Yeah.
The guys at the top of the board, I just went and you can look at mock drafts, Daniel Jeremiah, player rankings, ESPN, Mel Kiper and company. It doesn't actually give Kiper credit on the player rankings that they have right now. They both have Ashton Genty 3 or 4. I don't think he's getting to 20. I understand quarterbacks will change things in positions.
3 or 4 overall?
The third or fourth best prospect. They both have Abdul Carter. Both sites have Abdul Carter number 1, the pass rusher from Penn State. They both have Travis Hunter number 2, and they both have Genty 3 or 4 with another, I think maybe an alignment on one of them. Shador Sanders is Daniel Jeremiah has him 1 spot ahead of Cam Ward at 9 versus 10. One of the other, or has him right behind him. Sorry, Daniel Jeremiah has Cam Ward 9, Shador 10. ESPN has Shador 9, and has Cam Ward 18.
Who's number 1?
I'm saying as a quarterback. Those are your top 2 quarterbacks. The tight ends, which are
who do they have as the best prospect in the draft?
Abdul Carter, the kid from Penn State, the pass rusher.
Okay.
Speaking of Penn State, Tyler Warren, who could fill that Joker role, and a lot of people are like,
can he really? I mean, I've seen. Is he that guy?
I'm just going by the consensus.
Because the Joker role, correct me if I'm
mismatch.
wrong, it's a guy who can do a lot.
The guy who can do a lot, but can also create a mismatch. And so Jimmy Graham can't be covered conventionally, is sort of the thinking, or Jeremy Shockey. So
so
he called those guys jokers too, not just Kamara or Reggie Bush or Darren Sproles.
Yeah,
that's more conventional thinking to me or you. I would think. If I
I don't know enough about this Warren kid to know that, but
he's rated. Well, anyway, he's rated 5th. He's rated 5th on Daniel Jeremiah. ESPN has him 16, and 16's in reach because you could trade if you love him, you go get him. Colson Loveland, who's the other, just I think a little more traditional playmaking tight end, but probably cut out of those Iowa mold, like Sam Laporta type player, TJ Hawkinson, because it feels like Kittle's maybe a step above that talent wise, although Laporta's awesome now. They have ESPN has him 22 and DJ has him 24. But in one of the first mock drafts I saw, maybe DJ's first mock draft, he has Nick Emmanuel, the safety out of ESPN, going to the Broncos at 20. That guy's rated 21st by DJ and 24th by ESPN. So that's safety makes sense. You like PJ Locke, you don't necessarily love him. They didn't pay him like they love him. You like Brandon Jones, but he could also be replaced in a year or two if you like who you draft. So safety makes sense to me. Running back makes sense. Tight end makes sense. You don't want to just draft for need, but if a guy you love isn't there at 20, trade on back. Because the one thing that I did, just looking into it and texting a few people, the kind of that second round grade, second to fourth round is where the bulk of the talent is. Like picks 20 to 70 is where you're going to get more value. And one other thing about the draft too, about the grades, most teams don't have a first round grade on 32 players. They have it on 20 or 13 or players that they think, and everyone's scouting department is different. So if this is a light draft at the top and the meat of the draft really is in those day 2 picks, then trade back and pick up another second rounder, another third rounder.
Yeah, the Broncos have I think they have 7 picks, right? And they have 3
right.
6th round picks, no 7th round picks, a couple of them via trade. I mean, this is where George Payton is supposed to really show his mettle. And he has. He's drafted some all-pro players out of nowhere over the last 3 or 4 years since he's been here. Is this his 4th year or his 5th year?
This will be, so he went into Vic's final year.
Yeah.
Then Hackett. Right? So Vic's final year was his first draft. Hackett's first year was his second draft. Sean's first year was his third draft. So this will be his fourth draft.
Yeah.
Well, Pat Surtain was his first draft pick. So what Pat just finished? Pat just finished year 4?
I think so, yeah.
So
maybe he was here for
5th draft.
He was here for Sean Payton just finished his 2nd year here.
Yeah.
So it was last year Vic, 1 year Nathaniel Hackett, 2 with Payton. So now it's just going
2
into
draft
his 5th.
with Sean. So 3rd draft was Sean, right?
Right. And this is what we've been hearing all the whole time, that it's the middle of the draft that is really the meat for them, and it's also last year what we heard was the guys that they picked up, they had higher grades on all of them. They had higher grades on Troy Franklin. They had higher grades on Estime. They had higher grades on everybody than they got.
Chris Abrams-Drain.
Yeah, and so you would hope that continues. Sean Payton has been clear about this in the past, and it was last year in particular when we were talking about who the quarterback was going to be or who the Broncos were going to draft in the first round. And what Sean Payton says is everyone thinks they know, and we're happy that they think they know because we do it right and they don't. I'm paraphrasing what he said.
He goes, you like the way we do it,
or
something like that.
Yeah, we're happy that they don't know what the hell they're doing.
Basically, he said that at the combine in front of everybody.
Yeah, and so, all right, that's good. That's advantage Broncos because Sean Payton is smarter than you guys, and George Payton is smarter than you guys too. And I don't know. I would say that the results have borne that out
every year with this draft.
Because Nick Bonito and Jonathan
Cooper in the 7th round, Baron Browning, plenty of talent.
Quinn Miners
in the 3rd round.
Devon Vele, who came in and
5th, 6th round, whatever that was.
Yeah, and so these guys are performing at a very high level, and we hope it continues. But I would say that philosophically, do you choose the best player available or do you choose a position of need? And hopefully those two come together in the moment. I mean, you got a handful of guys you really love. And when your pick pops up, you got to trust your gut and go with a guy you think is going to make the whole team better. Because it's not just about plugging holes. It's about the ripple effect of bringing in an excellent player, his energy, his work ethic, the type of guy he is in the locker room. All that kind of stuff really matters. And I use Champ Bailey as an example all the time. But Champ Bailey didn't just plug a hole at corner. What he did was raise the level of everyone else around him. He makes your pass rush better, right? Because he can cover longer. The rest of the DBs in that room get better because they see him work every day. The receivers who get to practice against him every day get better a lot faster than they would against inferior competition. So the type of player you bring in and the type of guy he is raises the stakes for everyone around. And it doesn't always just have to be this position of need. We're plugging him in. It could just be a badass dude that you want to see around.
The other thing that you're helped by when you're a playoff team is you're going to be picking lower, which means that your team's already in pretty good shape, you would think. And so at 20, you have flexibility. So if there's a running back you love and you have him graded 23rd and you have an old lineman, you could probably slide him up and feel okay with it. But if you have a running back, a tight end, and a safety, all things you need, but you have them all in the 30s, there's probably somebody that wants to go get an O-lineman at 20. And you just signed Garrett Bowles. Your whole O-line is set, at least for this year. Not that you don't want to keep developing depth.
I did read somewhere that the center could be an upgrade that the Broncos
Maybe
go
so.
after. Maybe
And-
there's a guy they like. That's what I was saying. Like maybe there's a dude out there like a Creed Humphrey kind of guy. I haven't,
Broke down the
studied.
center.
No, I
strong
have
guy.
not. But that could be your missing piece along the offensive line to really take them to the next level. I'm not saying Alex Forsyth or what's the other guy?
Luke Wattenberg, who
Luke
started
Wattenberg.
most of the season.
Yeah, or Wattenberg are insufficient or inadequate because they played pretty darn well. But you're always trying to upgrade, and you're always looking for that piece that's going to make you stronger. And so, how will they approach it? Because it's like if you come upon a guy who you absolutely love, but you already have a guy that's pretty darn good there, what do you do? Do you and there could be some surprises along that line, like some guys who you think are safe might not be, like corner Riley Moss could be replaced. He's played really well, but he's also been banged up for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So if there's a corner that you absolutely love, maybe you go after him in the first round.
I think that's the advantage of being a good team with a lot of good young players, and the vets that you have, you feel comfortable with them, except at tight end, but you can't force it. If those top two tight ends that are clearly a cut above everybody else, at least as it stands now, are both gone, then you might be looking to trade back because the running backs that you liked were gone. The safety, you don't want to pull the trigger on a safety at 20 because you like the safeties you have. You want to add depth there. So it's when you're coming off a playoff season with a lot of young talent, you're in a much better spot than when the Broncos picked at 20 in 2017 and took Garrett Bowles, or 19, whatever that was. And they could have traded up for Patrick Mahomes then as well, among others. But they needed a tackle, and they got a tackle. They didn't take Ryan Ramczyk. They took Bowles ahead of him. And the Saints took Ryan Ramczyk, and he's been good, but Garrett's been really good over the long haul.
Yeah, the offensive line looks great. I just wonder, middle linebacker, something might be done there.
Agreed.
Safety, something could be done there. Like you mentioned, tight end.
They could upgrade because you got Alex Singleton coming off an injury. Cody Barton and Justin Sternad are both free agents. So...
And I loved how Cody Barton stepped up and he played really well. I think he, exceeded a lot of expectations. Remember, that was Alex Singleton's job. Alex goes down and then he takes over the green dot and did a really good job. And so that's the hard part about running a team is like this guy came in and did a really good job. Nobody thought he was going to. We signed him to a 1-year deal. He's kind of a journeyman, kind of, doesn't fit the bill. But here he is making plays. Here he is as a leader. Here he is galvanizing the team and stepping in and really performing at a high level. Do we reward that and sign him to a long-term deal, or do we let him walk and take the chance to plug in someone else who might not play it as a high of a level? So these are some really difficult decisions that are made. And, it's an inexact science. People think that the guy that you have in college, he's going to end up being the guy you have in the pros. There's a lot of extenuating circumstances that would suggest that, it's not always the same dude. And so you got to trust your process and then plug him in and see what he does. But it's going to be an interesting season, a lying season, but it'll be interesting.
It always is. Final thing, and you mentioned green dot in the helmet.
Yeah.
We need to give a shout out to the Denver Broncos and the Denver Broncos Foundation, started by Carrie Walton Penner. She spearheaded it. The Broncos have been great in the community really since Pat Bowlen took over, and it was an point of emphasis. I know it was for you. But when they announced on Tuesday their all-in, all-covered plan and what that meant for high school kids in the state, that not just a handful, not 100 schools, but every school, all 277 high schools, from 6-man in really small towns all the way up to 5A state championship caliber teams like Cherry Creek and Valor and Legend. Every single kid is going to get an Axiom helmet that plays tackle football at a high school from the freshman level through the varsity team. And the program is going to continue. It's not a 1-year, one and done donation. And you say, well, how much does it cost to do that? 15,000 helmets, which isn't the most. This isn't California or Texas in terms of the population, but the state-of-the-art Axiom helmet, which has some smart technology where you can track data. They'll fit it to every player's head. Kids will have their name on the helmet and all of that for as long as they're in each program. Talking about $750, $800 for these helmets.
1,000,
maybe even a 1,000.
That's what I saw listed at.
And so talking to high school coaches, and I talked to some pretty prominent ones, as well as Sam Pagano, who's a legendary coach in his own right, just about how unique this program is. And teams have given away helmets to to high school programs and youth programs, including the Broncos forever. But to say that every single high school kid in the state of Colorado is going to get this is a heck of an initiative by the Broncos with their all in all covered. And props to Kerry Walton Penner, to Greg Penner, who apparently it was in part his idea. They met with USA Football, which
Scott Hallenbach.
Yeah, he
gave him a presentation
and
let him understand what was going on in this state football wise. And high school participation is down. Why? Two main reasons. The barrier to entry is the money situation. A lot of these schools around have horrible equipment, and this is $1,000 helmet. You know what I mean? And a lot of times youth sports, your gear, your equipment becomes a status symbol. And the ones who can afford it get an advantage over the ones who do not. There are tons of high schools in town that are using inferior equipment, hand-me-downs, pads that are actually dangerous. So one of them was the barrier to entry is the money, and the two was the health and safety concerns. And a better helmet improves your health and safety concerns. You know, I mean, you played football as a kid. I played football in high school. You know, that first helmet you put on, it's rattling around on your head. The pads are falling out, chin straps loose. Guys, you know, you see the face in there and there's room on either side and rattling around. That's dangerous. You get hit like that, it's like getting clapped by a thunderbolt. You know what I mean? A snug fitting helmet for every single high school football player levels the playing field in ways that is hard to quantify. This is a pretty generous move by the Walton Penners and shows a commitment to not just the community, but to the sport itself and growing the sport. You know, the NFL is the biggest ticket in town, but if high school football dwindles, participation dwindles over the years, it could become a sport for the haves or the have-nots. And we want to make sure all kids have an opportunity to play, and the Walton Penners have done that.
Yeah, there was I looked at a New York Times article since 2006, 17% drop off across the country. It's seen an uptick the last couple of years. So it's more like it averaged out to about 15% because of this upswing. But that's in part due to programs like this and just an awareness about player safety, better pads, certainly a better helmet, better mouthpiece, mouth guard. All of it helps. Some things are unavoidable. We understand that, but you want to at least do all you can to mitigate silly injuries or unnecessary shots to the head that these helmets can potentially cushion. So again, yeah, like you said, props to them, and all in all coverage, a really cool program that I think will be duplicated by a lot of NFL teams in a lot of cities and states, and they're continuing to be at the forefront of stuff like that. So that's really cool.
Yeah, how about those Walton Penners? Only been in charge for a couple of years now, and already just kind of making waves. Yeah, becoming the standard, becoming the gold standard of NFL ownership. Now it pays to have that much money, but it's also you have to have vision, and these guys do, and they're paying attention to the community, and they're paying attention to the needs of the state, and really making, I think, the Bolins proud as to, you know, taking over this organization. And there was a lot of questions as to what it was going to be like selling this team, right? For the Bolins, who had their own dispute about who owned it, but
just that it was going to be run like Walmart was a concern,
right? But but there was a community standard and an organizational standard that the Bolins upheld that I think was really important to them when selling it to someone. And you mentioned it, the concerns that Walmart was going to come in and treat it like a Walmart
and streamline things,
right?
Which is what you just hear. You read Sam Walton's book about efficiency and having more people.
You read that?
I read excerpts, and then no lie, my dog ate it. I bought it for $5, and I was reading.
Your dog ate the book?
My dog literally chewed the book.
Wow.
So, but maybe I'll go listen to it, and that'll count. But to your point, though, they're not only meeting the standard; it feels like in their early stages are exceeding it with a new facility. Continued talks about a new stadium coming, not because they need it, but because they want it and can have it. And then we won't be talking about the Super Bowl in New Orleans. We're talking about a Super Bowl in Denver. Will the Broncos and Bo Nix be playing in it? Maybe so, but either way, we'll be there.
2032.
Anything's possible. So
yes, it is.
He's Nate Jackson. I'm BK. Thanks to Trusted American. Live, feel better. Thanks to everybody that was rocking with us this whole time. And we'll catch you next week, Super Bowl week from New Orleans, with more off field. Later.